Welcome to another episode of Well-Adjusted Mama. I'm your host, Dr. Laura Brayton, and today's guest is Holly Toronto speaking on Love Your Body. Holly is a certified master level coach through Health Coach Institute and has 4 years of experience helping highly driven women build resilience to toxic beauty and diet messages. She uses an intuitive and spiritual approach that guides her clients towards self-trust, confidence, and sovereignty over their entire being, body, mind, and soul. From this place, her clients are able to make self-guided decisions and finally live the life they desire in the body they live in today. For more information, please check out her website at loveyourbodyhc.com. Hi, Holly. Welcome to the show. Excited to have you on today.
Thanks for having me, Laura. I'm really excited to be here.
So please, let's start off with just sharing with the audience about who you are and your personal story of how you came to developing your health coaching business of loving your body.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Holly Toronto. I am a master level certified health coach. I've been working full-time as a health coach for 4 years now, which feels like an incredible feat. And my specialty is in body image and intuitive eating for women. And so what that really means is that I'm helping women heal from pervasive body shame and find peace in their relationship with food. So they're no longer dieting and restricting, so that they can actually put their energy towards more important things in their life besides the pursuit of thinness. So that's a little bit about what I currently do. And I'm glad, Laura, that you mentioned the personal aspect of this, because I think that anybody who gets into coaching work and specifically body image coaching work, usually they have their own personal story that brought them to this experience. And that was absolutely true for me. So as anybody's story goes, there's many twists and turns and intersections. I'll try not to give the full heroine's journey, but my relationship with my body started at a very, very, very young age. As far as, when I first started to think that there was something wrong with my body was around the age of 8 years old. And that was the first time, I tried to go on a diet. It was the first time I tried to lose weight. And that followed me all throughout my high school years, where I just had a really fraught relationship with food. I was doing some pretty disordered things and, not eating enough, and then having those sort of like after school binges that would happen. And then when I moved away to college, that all continued for me, except I also developed female adult acne when I was 18 years old. And so it felt like I was wearing my body image issues right on my face. And it was really, really challenging for me for most of my young adulthood. I also worked in the fashion industry for 7 years. So I moved to New York City 15 years ago to pursue a career in the fashion industry, which, as I'm sure you're probably aware, it's a very image-centric industry, right?
Extremely.
Yeah. And I absolutely fell into that. So I found myself, bonding with other women over dieting and comparing my body to other women and really wrapping up a lot of my self-worth and my value and how I looked. All the while trying to navigate acne, which I was doing through, taking antibiotics and using really harsh creams and steroids on my skin, which ultimately helped, but were doing some deeper insidious things to my body. And then after I got married, I decided that I was going to take a more holistic approach to managing my acne, which can be a really beautiful thing for many people. But there's also this kind of insidious thing that happens underneath the surface for some women when they choose that path. And so what that looks like for me is I started working with a naturopathic doctor who overnight put me on a really extreme elimination diet. So I cut out everything. I won't mention exactly what it was, but it was like that standard anti-inflammatory diet. And it was supposed to be a very temporary, 6-week experiment that was supposed to uncover anything that might have been triggering breakouts in my skin. Yet that 6 weeks came and went, and there was no plan for integration. There was no plan for testing those foods and integrating them back into my diet. And so what ended up happening is I ended up staying on this highly restrictive diet for about 1.5 years. And during that time, a few things happened. The first one that I always name is that my skin did not clear up. In fact, it got worse in many ways. I developed some pretty severe digestive issues. My hair was falling out. But on top of that, I also lost a ton of weight. right? And so I started to receive all of the praise, all of the accolades that women in our society get when they're able to lose weight and keep it off. And so I actually built my health coaching business off of that paradigm, helping women lose weight through disordered eating, essentially, and restriction. Yet underneath the surface, there was things that were happening, like my hair was falling out. My skin wasn't clearing up. I was socially isolating. I was really stressed and anxious around food all of the time. And fast forward a little bit of time here, I went on a trip with my husband right after I left my corporate job in 2016. And we went on a cruise. And anybody who's ever been on a cruise knows like what you do on a cruise is eat. You eat lots of food. There's delicious foods. And I found myself really having like stress and anxiety every single day around the food choices and really just not being able to be present or enjoy myself on this trip. And my husband, lovingly pulled me aside and just sort of mentioned to me, like, you're kind of making this trip really hard on me. And you also don't seem happy or healthy. Like, what's going on for you? And when I got really honest and clear with myself about why I was so anxious and stressed on this trip about food, it was because I was terrified that if I were to allow myself to eat these foods, that I would put on weight. And with that, I would lose all of the praise, all of the accolades, all of the quote unquote success I had created by being able to lose weight and keep it off. And so that was really a moment of reckoning for me, where I was starting to understand that, wow, I really equate a lot of my self-worth with how I look. And as synergy would have it, I had brought one book with me on that trip. It's a book called Intuitive Eating, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit today. And it really allowed myself to see very clearly what I was creating for myself and potentially for my clients around disordered eating and body shame. And I came back from that trip and I really started to integrate these principles and what I was learning. And from that also found the body positive movement and starting to understand how I can disconnect my worth from my external appearance as well as my health from my weight and really learn how to take care of myself from a weight neutral perspective and honor and accept exactly where my body wants to be. After doing that work on myself, I was able to bring it into my practice to really support my clients in doing the same.
Oh, that's beautiful. So you actually were a health coach prior to this aha moment, is what you're saying. And then it shifted. The type of coaching you did shifted.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I find that that's actually very common for health coaches. It's why I end up working with a lot of health coaches as clients. Like, they come into this work with a very disordered relationship to their body and food and think that they want to help people, but they have those things that are happening for them under the surface where they're like, I feel like I'm, not allowed to eat certain things, or I can't, I have to look perfect all the time. And so they end up doing the work with me before they're even able to put themselves out there in their business.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. It's always was weird to me meeting health coaches or nutritionists that were overweight, for example, and just kind of like, how does that work?
Yeah. And, it's interesting. And I know that you've been bringing on some health at every size people to talk about that paradigm. And really, there's so much. I wouldn't even say it's emerging because it's research that's been around for a while, but it's starting to gain more popularity in press and really just looking at some of the lies that we've been told about, BMI and health and body size and health, and seeing that people in the quote unquote overweight or obese category, they can live just as long, if not longer, than people in the normal weight category. And it's definitely very controversial to talk about those types of things. But I think that's, why you and I are sort of talking today is really looking at body image and how when we actually learn how to love and accept our bodies for where they are, we actually see improvements in our health. So studies have actually shown that adults with greater weight satisfaction have better health outcomes and better health behaviors regardless of size. So in other words, like, the better you feel about yourself, like how you look, the better you actually take care of yourself. And that's sort of the case that I make for really centering body image work when it comes to taking care of our bodies.
I mean, it makes perfect sense, right? I mean, when we disrespect our bodies and neglect our bodies, there's like a low self-esteem component there, right?
Absolutely.
And it's just really going to that deeper level. And so, I'd like to talk about that deeper level of why there are women that don't love their body. And to your point, this doesn't start really as an adult woman. This is almost across the board as a child, learned from the first 7 years of our life when our subconscious mind is formed. So can you talk about like if those beliefs have been created for these young girls, how do you change that story?
Yeah, it's a very nuanced and complex question, and it's one that I explore in depth with my clients because each person's body story looks so different. And again, like I mentioned before, there's so many intersecting components to one's body image. Things like race can impact somebody's body image, as well as like religious upbringing or the community that you grew up in. So many different intersecting points. The place that I'm going to start with this is something that I think is true for many women. And if you think about over the course of human history, women, we've had the right to a vote for about 100 years, right? And owning property, we haven't had that right for very long.
It's not very long at all.
No. And in fact, women were considered property, right? It was something, we were sort of paid for and traded between our fathers and our husbands. And to actually, be quote unquote attractive and to fit into the standards of beauty of the decade, because as we know, they change from decade to decade. Being able to fit into those stories and those narratives is actually sort of deeply built into our survival, right? Because as women, we didn't really have access to be able to survive on our own and take care of ourselves on our own. And so really, it's it's built into our very DNA to essentially like prioritize our external appearance for resources, for access that we thought at that time only men could provide us with, right? And so that story is sort of, it's built and continues to be built into the narrative. I think Disney and children's storytellers are doing a better job of kind of deconstructing that story. But if you think about, for myself, growing up in the 80s and the 90s and watching Disney princesses and sort of seeing like that was the model of femininity. And, the outcome was always marriage and being taken care of by the man. And so when I'm looking at body image work with my clients, we're always looking at like what's deeper, right? Because it's never actually about the flaw or the cellulite or the quote unquote extra weight or the tummy roll, right? It's about all of the things that we think that thing means about us, right? Does it mean that I'm unlovable, right? Does that mean that I can't have the success or the life that I desire? Right. And so from that place, really deconstructing those lies, because the truth is that we live in a world where we can, for many of us, if we have that privilege, we can take care of ourselves, right? We can build a life and a career for ourselves outside of the confines of marriage. And in fact, we can be equals with our partner, if not, earn more than them at this point. So it's really about kind of deconstructing those lies and really looking at like, what is the thing that I'm actually searching for when I'm wanting to shrink my body?
Wow. So I can only imagine this is really that this type of work does bring up a lot of emotions, some of them quite painful, but I can see why it would be so healing. And this is foundational, right? Like if we don't love our bodies, love ourselves, respect ourselves, then how can we move forward in life, right? With our purpose, our passion, and create what we're, our destiny is.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
So I know that's a big part of what you do. So I saw on your website, Homecoming, make peace with your body, play big in your life. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So this is a new program that I just started co-creating with a fellow health coach. We've been certified through the same health coaching certification, and we've been friends for quite some time. And we do the exact same work. We always kind of joked about that. Like anytime we're in a circle together of other coaches, it's like, what do you do? And it's like, Holly and Julie do the exact same thing. And so we decided to combine forces and bring, our collective 7 years of experience together doing this work with women and put it into a really powerful, sort of VIP level group coaching program. And so what we're saying is it's called Homecoming, make peace with your body and play big in your life. And the title Homecoming is really a key component of this program, because what we've uncovered, and we sort of touched on this a little bit, is like when a woman is living her life through the lens of body shame and dieting, and she's kind of caught up in this narrative that her life is on the other side, her biggest, boldest life is on the other side of losing weight or having some shift or change in her body, it can keep her in this place where she's truly disconnected from her passions, from her desires for herself, from actually even really knowing herself at all, right? Because in so many ways, we're outsourcing our intuition. We're outsourcing our desires. We're allowing somebody else to tell us what's possible for us. And so with homecoming, the intention is sort of to peel back those layers, to deconstruct those lies that we've internalized about our bodies, and to really create this like peaceful and nourishing relationship with food, where food no longer feels like this enemy, right? Or this thing to punish or berate ourselves for. And from that place of just like kind of clearing all of that clutter of body shame and dieting, getting to actually come home to yourself, right? Actually know yourself at the deepest level. And that's the intention behind the homecoming program. And really, like, I just see our bodies as our greatest teacher. And so we're using our bodies as this gateway to really, really deeply know and come home to ourselves.
Wow, that's really beautiful. And I do love the synergy of working with another, like-minded colleague. I think there's so much power in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So I also saw on your site, you talked a lot about what's going on culturally with dieting and body image specific to the quarantine. And I thought that was really interesting. And I'd love for you to go into that a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. So when quarantine first hit, right, and everyone was sort of forced to stay home and be out of their normal schedules and routines, this really started to bring up a lot for women, right? Like they no longer had access to the gyms and the classes that they used to go to, or the salad place that they used to get their salads from. And really, like, it was deeply, deeply confronting. And I saw that as an opportunity to actually help women see how much of their life revolves around trying to control their bodies, right? And how much energy they're giving away to either like keep their body small or lose weight. And so this like phrase around like the quarantine 15, right, started to come on the scene. And I was like, oh, we got to address this. Like we actually have to look at this, because it really is like, it's so deeply problematic that anytime like something comes up, right? Like anytime, like if we are, knocked out of our schedule or unable to, do the same things that we were doing to take care of our bodies, that like the first thing is not health. The first thing is weight. Right? Like it's not necessarily about like, oh, am I making sure that I'm moving my body and nourishing my body with foods that I enjoy? It's like, oh, it's, will I put on weight? Right. And so it's really important for us to really look at that and see like, oh, okay, like, wow, like here it is, like right in front of us, this expectation that women's bodies stay exactly the same through all phases of their life. I have clients who feel like they should look the same way that they did when they were 20 when they're 45. And it's just like, no, that's not how it works. Like bodies are meant to grow and change and shift and ebb and flow through life, right? And so this season of quarantine, this is just a small, it feels like I'll say, it feels like it's been going on for a very, very long time, right? But it's just a small season of life, right? And so instead of, putting all of your energy towards trying to make sure that you control your body and your body doesn't change and you don't put on weight, it's like, no, actually, can I use that time to reflect? And can I use that time to go inwards? And can I use that time to pause and sort of begin to look at, all of the ways we've given our power away to beauty culture and diet culture to tell us what we should look like. And so from a body image perspective, like that's a huge opportunity, but also from an eating perspective. And, emotional eating is certainly something that I talk about a lot with my clients, but I actually look at emotional eating from a different perspective than what I think is the dominant way of looking at it. What I normally hear is like, oh, okay, if you're experiencing emotional eating, you have to learn how to process your emotions or deal with your emotions in another way. And yeah, that's true. And that has validity. But also, what studies have actually shown is that people who don't have a history of dieting or restricting food don't actually tend to turn to food when they're experiencing difficult emotions, right? They actually have like other coping strategies versus somebody who diets and restricts. They more likely tend to turn to food when there's heightened emotions.
Oh, because it's like a version of control. They need to feel like they can control something in their lives.
That is absolutely part of it. That can be part of it, as a sense of control, but also because restriction gives us such an adverse response to our bodies that it almost creates like what can feel like compulsive behaviors with food. So like we as a species have evolved to be acutely resistant to restriction. So anytime we experience restriction, whether that's on a biological level of not eating enough food or on a psychological level, like the mere thought of like, I can't eat Ben and Jerry's ice cream or whatever it is, those experiences actually create cravings and erratic thoughts and behaviors around food. Versus when somebody knows that they have access to food, they have access to the Ben and Jerry's if they want it, they have access to the cookies, they have access to whatever the food is whenever they want it, they aren't necessarily controlled by it. They aren't necessarily feeling like it's compulsive. It's this thing that they like have to eat. Otherwise, it'll never be available to them ever again. Mm-hmm. And so a really powerful way to actually navigate emotional eating is to sort of neutralize it in a way, to know that like, okay, like this is an option for me. Like I can emotionally eat if I want, right? But also like I have so many other strategies available to me. And so it's actually like an expanding our menu of options, right? Like options of coping strategies. It's like I could emotionally eat, or, you know, I could watch a show on Netflix, or I could call a friend, or I could go for a walk, or I could read a book, you know, take a bath, whatever it is, right? So it's about expanding the menu of choice, right? When it comes to coping versus feeling like we have to restrict that or we can't have that as a choice for navigating our emotions, because that's just sort of using dieting, which doesn't work, right? To navigate the issue of emotional eating, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's always nice to have extra tools in your tool belt when it comes to managing stress and things that are coming up, painful thoughts, feelings, emotions, how to process it. And I think it's interesting when you're talking, I'm thinking about my grandparents who were Holocaust survivors and they were actually starved.
Wow.
Right. Going through that process. So food for them was like, there was a part of them like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get a meal again. You know what I mean? And that was just the conditioning that happened from that experience. Thank God so many of us haven't had to go through that, but it almost sounds like a little bit similar. Like there's like, is food going to be available? Or somebody who's, you know, not maybe grew up very poor and didn't necessarily have access to 3 meals a day, right?
Oh, 100%. I was actually just writing a post about this because, you know, you mentioned like your grandparents as Holocaust survivors. And so they've actually had the experience of like being without food, being starved, right? And like that's actually trauma to the body, right? And so often, you know, in the diet culture that we live in, like for instance, like some of these, and I won't mention numbers specifically, but like there's, you know, like Weight Watchers, the calorie count that they recommend to their people, to their participants, is actually the same calorie count that's recommended for toddlers, right? So there's like adults that are eating the amount of foods that a toddler needs. And then also it's like, it's considered like starvation, essentially. Like that calorie count is close to starvation calorie count. And so in many ways, like the diets and the systems that are being encouraged for people to like lose weight are starvation techniques, right? And so again, like I had mentioned, I can go into a little bit more detail. Like when we, as a human species, right, our bodies learned how to calibrate for feast and famine. You know, when we didn't have, at least here in the West, like the plentiful resources of food that we have today, our bodies learned how to calibrate, right? So when there was times of feast, our bodies knew how to like load up, right? Get as much as they can to prepare for the famine, right? And so when the famine came, our bodies knew how to, you know, decrease energy levels so we could conserve, and slow down metabolism so we could conserve, and actually, you know, decrease sexual desire so we weren't tempted to have sex and get pregnant because our bodies couldn't sustain a pregnancy, right? Our bodies are so smart and they're so wise, and they know how to calibrate for feast and famine. Yet in today's diet culture, there's so many people who are intentionally putting themselves into the place of famine, right? So the metabolism slows down, the energy level decreases, all of those things still happen in the body. But then what happens too is like our bodies will get to a point where they're like, no more, right? I'm in survival mode now. And so it'll increase cravings. It'll increase what feels like erratic behaviors around food, which is basically a survival response from our body trying to get us to eat. And then from that place, when a person actually starts eating normally again, right, the body is essentially like, I don't trust you, right? I don't trust that we're not going to go back into starvation mode. So I'm going to load up on even more food, or I'm sorry, even more, like I'm going to hold on to even more, sort of as like a reserve for if you ever put me into that starvation place again. And so that's why so many people, in fact, 2/3 of people who lose weight put back on more weight and then some. And that's essentially our body like holding on to a reserve. And so that's why this dieting, like that's why it doesn't work, right? Like that's why 98% of diets fail, because our bodies were not built to sustain that. It actually experiences that as illness and a threat to its survival.
Wow. And yeah, it's, everyone knows like yo-yo dieting is not good for you and your weight is up and down. And then there's also the hormonal component that is created right when you starve yourself and your metabolism slows down. And then when you start eating again, your metabolism is now sluggish and not able to burn off those calories as efficiently. Thyroid is impacted. It's, the whole endocrine system.
Yeah. I mean, I've worked with several clients at this point who've come to me after periods of extreme dieting where they lost their period.
Yes.
Like that.
Amenorrhea is a real thing because they're just too thin. And the body is so smart. They're like, this body is not in a good place to sustain a healthy pregnancy. So we're not going to give you a period.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And it can take so much time to get that back. I have clients who are still, even though they've totally weight restored and healed their relationship to their body and food, it's like when it becomes so pervasive, like it's taken them a long time to get their periods back and really rebuild from that place. So I'm glad you mentioned the hormonal piece of it because our bodies just, they really I'm amazed at what they're capable of doing, right? To keep us alive. Like our bodies will fight for their survival.
Mm-hmm.
The very things that some people perceive as I don't have discipline or, I'm unmotivated or whatever it is, it actually has nothing to do with that at all. And really has way more to do with our body just being like, don't do that to me anymore. Like, that's not what I want. Right. Which of course, begs the question of like when somebody's, well, then how do I lose weight? Right. And, the answer to that question is it's really tough for people to hear this, but there actually is no scientific evidence that shows that intentionally pursuing weight loss through dieting restriction is possible ever. Right. And so that's where the body image work again becomes so important, where we're learning how to take care of our bodies from a weight neutral perspective, where, movement is about moving our bodies because that increases longevity and it increases feel-good hormones and it allows us to like move emotions through our body versus like, I have to punish myself at the gym because I ate French fries for lunch or, nourishing our bodies with foods that we enjoy. It's because we know our bodies feel good when we eat that way, right? Knowing that there's flexibility and freedom to enjoy a vast array of foods, but like, it's no longer like I can only eat salad or I can't eat carbs because I have to lose weight, right? It's like, it's really focusing on nourishment as opposed to punishment and constantly trying to shrink our bodies.
Yeah. And our bodies need and deserve nourishment. And it's the foundation. Our physical health, our physical bodies are what allow us to do everything. Right. So I think it's a great perspective to just think like, how can I treat my body better and how can I love my body more? You had mentioned intuitive eating earlier. I'd love for you to talk more about what that means.
Yeah. So intuitive eating just released its 4th edition this year, like this month.
The book.
Actually. Yes.
Okay.
And so the book that I had mentioned when I was telling my story, I think was probably the 3rd edition, and they've updated it since then. And intuitive eating, it's built on 10 different principles. And I don't have to go through all of them now, but I would highly recommend that anybody like pick up this book if you feel like you struggled with dieting or restriction in the past. Like this is the book to read for sure. And what this book is about is there's a principle that I use in my coaching practice that's just probably the most confronting thing for people to hear about intuitive eating, but it's also the biggest game changer when it comes to actually making peace with our bodies, right? Because so many of them are like, well, if I'm not dieting, I'm not following this specific plan anymore, like, what do I do instead, right? Like, how do I actually take care of myself? And it's controversial to hear this, but it's also incredibly key if we want to have a peaceful and sustainable relationship with food. So that foundational principle of intuitive eating is something called unconditional permission to eat. And so what that means is like, you are allowed to eat whatever you want, whenever you want it, in the quantity that you want to eat it. And anytime I tell someone about this, like, they look at me like wide-eyed in terror. They're like, what do you mean I can eat whatever I want whenever I want it? Like, what kind of health coach are you that would tell me that? Right? What I say to that is like, I'm the type of health coach that knows that you putting those rules and restrictions on what you're allowed to eat are something that is actually doing you more harm than good, right? You are inevitably going to rebel against them. You are inevitably going to quote unquote fail at that diet that you're on. And so instead, if we want to truly feel at peace around food, it's knowing that we have permission to eat it. And what this is not about ignoring our bodies. This is not about ignoring basic nutrition information, because intuitive eating also talks about gentle nutrition and how to honor our bodies through gentle nutrition. But really, what it's about is putting you back in the driver's seat when it comes to food, right? So for instance, like what we were talking about before, when somebody has sort of this feast and famine with food, they experience things like what we call with intuitive eating, like the Last Supper mentality, right? Where they know that like the diet's going to start on Monday. And so on Sunday, they eat all of the things and end up feeling really sick, right? Or maybe there's someone who's like, I'm just not going to eat today, but then they have these massive binges at night, right? And so that is your body being in reaction to restriction. Versus when your body knows it has unconditional permission to eat, you're building trust with your body again. Your body is learning how to trust you. Your body is knowing that you're not going to put them back into a survival state. And so it's about sort of like neutralizing food, bringing some peace and some calm into the eating experience. It's like, okay, like I know that I have unconditional permission to eat what I want when I want it. And from that really peaceful, trusting place, what would I like to choose to eat today? Right? Is it that I want to have salmon and rice and veggies? Is it that I want pizza? Is it that I want, a snack? Like, what is it that I really want? And being able to remove that emotional reaction from it, where there's no like guilt or shame if you choose the thing that you maybe perceived as quote unquote bad, right? You're able to just choose that thing, eat it, and move on with your life and not end up in this like guilt downward spiral where it's like, oh, I've fallen off of the wagon. I might as well stay off. It's like, oh no, I ate that choice. I ate that food. Now I can move on with my life. It's about making it like that simple, right? I worked with a client for a long time. When she came to me, she would describe her relationship with food as like the ticker tape on the New York Stock Exchange, right? Like there was this like ticker tape constantly going by in her head is like, how many calories did I eat today? Did I eat carbs and now I can't eat them for the rest of the day? Like just constantly thinking about food and her food choices.
That's exhausting.
I know. And really learning how to give herself unconditional permission to eat really neutralize that voice and shut it down. So now she's able to listen to her body and understand what her body wants and needs in any given moment. And then from that place, like put her energy towards the things that she really enjoys. Like once she finally found peace with food, she was able to really put her energy towards like taking acting classes and expressing herself creatively. Like that's what gets to happen when we do this work on our relationship to our bodies and foods. It opens up so much more possibility in our lives than we ever thought possible.
Mm-hmm. That's juicy. I love that. Yeah. The other thing that comes up with me with intuitive eating, as we're eating whatever we need to eat, right, to nourish our body, there's a mindfulness, right? Like instead of eating in front of your computer while you're working and just being mindless, you're really appreciating every bite. You're thoroughly chewing your food. You're thanking the food for giving your body the nutrients it needs. I mean, is that part of it, I'm assuming, or I don't know.
So with intuitive eating, it doesn't focus on that as much. Like there can be some crossover between the mindful eating movement as well as the intuitive eating movement. And intuitive eating absolutely suggests that you slow down and listen, because if we can't do that, then we're not going to ever really be able to attune to our bodies. But like the thing that it's really, and at least this is sort of my takeaway from it, is like to release perfectionism in a way.
Okay.
So it's like, if you can't eat like a perfectly balanced meal, like that's okay. And if you do eat fast at some point because you're like moving between different projects, like that's okay. Know that you can choose differently next time.
Yeah.
There is an intentionality behind it, but also really balanced with like, how can we move away from perfectionism, if that makes sense?
Right. Yeah. Like there's a forgiveness, like, okay, especially for new moms. Okay. Today you had you're standing eating at the counter while your children are running around, and it isn't the most relaxing, calm meal, but that's okay. You still nourished your body.
Yeah, exactly. I think intuitive eating, and especially the newer edition, which I have not read yet, I have so many books on my list. It's really trying to make the idea of intuitive eating more accessible, right? Because first, like you mentioned, mothers with multiple children, to be able to sit down and enjoy a meal and chew every bite 20 times and all of those kinds of things, like it can feel like really inaccessible. Or, for somebody who does shift work and they get 20 minutes to eat, or get no lunch break at all, or, works multiple jobs or whatever it is, like that can feel really inaccessible to some people. And so I think it's like, as much as possible, sort of removing any other sticks with which to measure ourselves, because as women and as people in general, like we don't need any more of that. We don't need any more unrealistic expectations. And so like the biggest takeaway with intuitive eating for me, it's about getting back to a place where eating can just be easy. Right? It's like, it's not something that we have to put so much energy and so much thought into. It's just like, it gets to be easy and it gets to be pleasurable and it gets to be enjoyable. And yes, like for me, my eating experiences that are most joyful and pleasurable are when I'm like fully present with the meal and I am enjoying it and I'm tasting it and I'm chewing it and I'm like with somebody, I'm with my partner and we're having that together. You know what I mean? But always, like, again, as much as we can remove any expectations or measuring sticks, the more effective it will be.
Mm-hmm. And, a lot of our listeners are pregnant and new mamas. So their bodies have gone through like massive transformation because they are making or made a baby. Yeah. So what would you say to that demographic of women about loving their body?
Oh, I would just say, like, I have not had a baby yet. It's something, one day I hope that I'm fortunate enough. But I just look at women who have had babies with just so much awe. Like, can you, your body did that. Your body like grew another human being inside of you. Like,
it's so amazing. Such a miracle.
Incredible. It is such a miracle. And so, when we live in a culture that really pressures women, almost like I've heard from some women, like almost immediately after giving birth, it's like, all right, now the focus is like, quote unquote, getting your body back. Right. And what I always say to that is like, oh, where did your body go? Right. Yeah. Like, I didn't realize you lost your body. Like, did you become a ghost? Like, no, your body is still here. And your body, something that I'll just preface by saying this, like a way that I've learn to relate to my own body and how I encourage my clients to relate to their bodies is to actually think about our bodies as a person, right? Our bodies are human beings. And one way we can practice that is by actually calling our bodies by the pronouns that we identify with, right? So like for myself, like I identify as a she and a her. And so I relate to my body as she, right? I'm listening to her. I'm relating to her. And so that's what I would first and foremost say to that demographic is to really start to relate to your body as a person, right? Like, how is she feeling? What is she needing? Not like, what is society expecting of your body after just giving birth to a human being, right?
It's like how you would treat your best girlfriend is what you're saying.
Exactly. Or maybe even how you would treat your baby with like such tenderness, such love, such like even appreciation, appreciating our bodies and what they do for us cannot be underestimated when it comes to doing body image work, right? If you're at a place where you're looking in the mirror and you're like, I cannot like what I see, right? Like I can't love it. I can't like it. What I say to that is like, I understand like our culture doesn't create that as a possibility for women at most stages of their life. But if you're not able to get there yet, right? What could you start by just like appreciating that your body does for you, right? Can you appreciate that your body's ability to heal, right? To recover, to restore your body's ability to produce nourishment. Like I actually don't know the exact number, but isn't it like something like 200 or something different formulas of breast milk that our bodies know how to make for our babies?
It's really, I would say, infinite,
Yeah.
because it's whatever the baby's nutrient needs are at that moment. The baby's saliva tells the mother's brain through her nipple.
Oh,
The chemicals are set and said, this is what you need to put in the milk.
oh my
It's
God.
like you don't get any more custom than that.
Oh my God, I get chills just thinking about that. Like that's what your body can do. And so like if
Yeah.
you're noticing judgments about like, oh, I can't wait to like get my body back or
Right.
my
Fit back into my skinny jeans.
Exactly. It's like, how can you lean into appreciation for what your body just did and know that our bodies are so wise, right? They're so intelligent. They know exactly where they want to be when we let them. Our bodies can regulate our weight in the same way that they regulate temperature, right? When we get out of their way, when we stop trying to control and manipulate them. And so how can you just lean into trust, know that your body will be where she wants to be and really just focus on that sense of like appreciation. And then, even further to that, like in other cultures, things like stretch marks or saggy skin around the middle is actually like a badge of honor for women.
Yeah.
Right. Because they've carried a baby, and like what an honor and what a privilege and what a feat that is. And so really learning how to look at those aspects of your changing body from a place of celebration.
Yeah. And that just reminded me of something else, because I'm a new mom. My son is 2.5. And I remembered a girlfriend telling me this, and it really felt good for me, because after I gave birth, I was breastfeeding my son. And I would say the pregnancy weight just came off quite naturally and normally. And it just, my body no longer needed it. Right. But it held on to like that last 5 pounds. And I was like, what's going on here? And this wise woman was like, your body is holding on to that until you stop breastfeeding, because it goes back to that very like indigenous, like in case there's a famine around the corner, I need to use that fat to make breast milk for my son. And so my body was like not interested in letting go of that until the nursing relationship ended. And that was reassuring for me to know that. And I could, feel comfortable with that. I'm like, it's 5 pounds, right? No big deal. We did stop breastfeeding at 10 months old. That 5 pounds was gone. It just was no longer needed. And it said goodbye. But just having an awareness like this is normal and natural, and hearing that from another woman's perspective was very helpful for me.
Yeah. Oh, that is so powerful.
Holly, do you have any last thoughts that you wanted to share with our audience?
Oh my gosh. I mean, there's so many things that we could continue to talk. Like this is such an endless conversation, truly. And, as much like as we covered today, we just sort of scratched the surface of like what needs to be talked about when it comes to women's bodies and sort of the narratives that we've embodied from our culture. But I would just invite you to get really curious. Like the question that I always bring to my clients, and I talk a lot about this on my social media, is when you are experiencing body shame, or when you're experiencing self-critical thoughts, or you're wanting to go on a diet or change your body, to actually ask yourself the question, who's profiting from me feeling this way about myself?
Wow.
Because our current economic structure is one that thrives off of scarcity, that it's one that thrives off of people feeling like they are scarce or lacking in something, so that we buy, right? We buy based off of emotion. We buy based off of like what we think we need for our social status, right? And so knowing that anytime that you are in a place of criticism about yourself or your body, there's likely somebody who is profiting. And so this is an opportunity for you to reclaim your power from these companies that are profiting off of like quote unquote insecurities that don't have our best interests in heart. Something like cellulite. Cellulite wasn't even a household name, like something that like people could identify until the 1970s, right? And you think about like women started like it was like third wave feminism at that point. Women were showing a lot more of their body, and like suddenly there's this flaw, right? That this product now that exists that we can like helps women get rid of cellulite, but it was never anything before that. In fact, it was like depicted in a lot of paintings that were supposed to be like beautiful and, signs of beauty and status. Like, so it's really important for us to continue to challenge those narratives that we are carrying around with us about our bodies.
Wow, that's such a good reminder. And, we're also, modeling for our children, especially for our daughters, about what healthy body image looks like.
Yes, exactly. I mean, that's something that with my homecoming program with my partner, Julie, we are really, really building into this idea of you get to, like say that it stops with me. Like we're ending generational body shame with me, right? I'm going to create a new legacy for the women who come after me, that they don't have to go through the same shame in their bodies that I did, or that my mother did, or that my grandmother did, right? It gets to stop with me.
Beautiful. Well, Holly, once again, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate you. It's clearly a topic you're very passionate about.
Yeah, I am for sure. Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
As a podcast dedicated to empowering families on making the best decision for them, I know how important it is to have choices. The Homeschool Buyers Co-op is the world's largest buyers club for homeschooling families. They have amazing free resources available on their website. And did you know it's free to join the co-op? They have the world's largest database of free homeschool curriculum, an incredibly cool free homeschool ID card generator, an amazing guide to field trips that are ideal for homeschooling families, as well as free webinars to help families that are making the transition to homeschooling. Go check out their website at homeschoolbuyerscoop.org and register for a free account with the code ADJUSTED to receive 5,000 smart points, which is equal to $5 toward anything available on the co-op.